The Lost Key. One quiet morning, a young man named David found an old brass key in a small secondhand shop. The key was small, a bit rusty, and tied with a faded blue ribbon. David held it in his hand, feeling the cool metal, noticing the small scratches and the way the ribbon moved softly in the breeze. He thought, "What does this key open?" David bought the key for a small price, and he kept looking at it while walking home. He watched how the sunlight touched the brass, making it shine softly. At home, he placed the key on the table and made tea. While sipping his tea, he could not stop looking at the key, wondering about its story. That night, David could not sleep. He looked out of his window and saw the moon shining in the dark sky. The key lay on his table, and moonlight fell on it, making it glow softly. It felt like the key was calling him, telling him that it was time for a new journey, a quiet adventure waiting to happen. He thought about how his life had become quiet and simple, and maybe this key would open something new, something unknown. The next morning, David decided to find what the key opened. He placed the key in his pocket, wore his jacket, and stepped out into the cool morning air. The streets were quiet, and the shops were slowly opening. David walked slowly, looking at every old door and every closed shop. He showed the key to many people. Some people smiled and said, "No, we have never seen this lock." Others looked at it and told him stories about places with old locks. A tea seller told him about an old library near the river that had been closed for years. A watch repairman told him about the old train station with lockers that people had forgotten. A flower seller told him about a small church on the hill where there were old wooden boxes that no one could open. David listened to these stories carefully, writing the places in his small notebook. David decided to visit these places one by one. First, he went to the old train station. It was quiet and empty. He could hear the wind moving through the broken windows and birds singing in the distance. David walked to the old lockers, feeling the cold metal, and tried the key, but it did not fit. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and listened to the silence of the station. Next, he went to the small church on the hill. The walk up the hill was peaceful. The sky was clear, and he could hear the sound of birds and the soft wind through the trees. When he reached the church, he saw old wooden boxes placed near the altar, covered in dust. David gently cleaned the dust with his hands and tried the key on one of the boxes, but it did not open. He sat quietly on a wooden bench, listening to the peaceful sounds around him. David felt a little sad, but he did not give up. He continued his journey, showing the key to people and asking if they had seen a lock that could match the key. In a small village, he met an old carpenter who was fixing old doors. David helped him for a few hours, holding the wood while the carpenter worked, and listening to the carpenter's stories about his life and the village. The carpenter offered him tea and bread, and they both laughed quietly while sharing stories. In a coastal town, David woke up early to join fishermen at dawn. The sky was a mix of orange and blue, and the sea was calm. He helped them pull the nets and felt the cold water on his hands. The fishermen sang soft songs while working, and David felt a calm joy while watching the sunrise over the water. In another town, he met an old woman who had lost her cat. David helped her search around the small streets, calling the cat's name softly. They found the cat sitting on a wall, watching them calmly. The old woman was very happy, and she invited David for tea. She told him stories about the town and how it had changed over the years. Everywhere David went, he found kindness, stories, and small moments of peace. Each day, he would look at the key before sleeping, wondering if tomorrow would bring him to the lock it opened. One evening, David arrived at the old library near the river. The building was covered in green vines, and the air smelled of rain and earth. Birds were flying back to their nests, and the sky was turning purple and pink. David stepped inside the library carefully, feeling the wooden floor creak under his feet. Inside, he found a small iron box on a wooden table. His heart was beating fast. He took a deep breath, held the key tightly, and placed it into the lock, turning it slowly. The key did not turn. The box remained locked. David stood there quietly, listening to the soft sounds of the river outside. At that moment, an old man holding a lantern entered the library. His face was kind, and he asked, "Are you looking for something?" David smiled gently and said, "I found this key, and I'm trying to find what it opens." The old man looked at the key and then at David and said softly, "Sometimes keys are not made to open locks. They are made to open your journey." David understood. He smiled and thanked the old man. He walked out of the library and sat near the river, watching the water move slowly under the moonlight. He thought about the people he had met, the stories he had heard, the quiet mornings, the soft songs of fishermen, and the peaceful sunsets he had seen. David realized that the key had opened something inside him. It had opened his fear, his loneliness, and had shown him the beauty of the world and the kindness of people. David put the key around his neck, tied with the faded blue ribbon, and promised himself that he would continue to travel, meet new people, learn new stories, and discover the world with a calm heart. The small lost key had given David a new meaning in life. It had shown him that sometimes it is not about finding a lock, but about finding yourself and the beauty of every small moment.